My film just showed next door here. It's called The Stand. I shot it for the Louisiana Film Prize, and I'm like, where do I get so I can't. It's hard to tell you because you can't go see it now. But you can go to Sync Up Cinema next in a couple of weeks in New Orleans and catch it. But basically, it's a film that I've been an editor for 10 years. Been writing for a good portion of that, and I just started directing, and I've started with shorts to see if I can jump into that arena. So. Oh, and my name is Eva Contis.
My name is Cam Owen, and I'm with Cam's Productions, and we do short films. We are doing a trilogy of short films. Last year, American Virgin screened here, and this year we have American Pride, which is in the live-action short film block tomorrow at 10 a.m. And I'm currently working on NCIS New Orleans in the production office, and
My name is TaRhonda Bazille. I'm from Baton Rouge, Louisiana. I did a documentary about Ryan Francis, who's also a native of Baton Rouge, Louisiana. It's actually my first feature documentary. Thank you. Thank you.
My name is Glen Petrie. And that always happens when I speak. I'm a Louisiana-based filmmaker, although I've worked from Paris to Mumbai. I write, produce, direct features, mostly dramas and thrillers, documentaries, IMAX, museum films, just a little bit of everything over the years. And I'm currently a professional in residence at LSU, and a short I did in the class was screened this morning, which is the festival film.
Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me okay? Yeah. I can hear the fan really well. So my name is Marco Williams. I have a film at the festival that I co-directed and co-produced. It's called Tell Them We Are Rising, the story of historically black colleges and universities. It plays this afternoon if you have not had a chance to see it. I like to refer to myself as a media maker and a media educator. I'm a professor at New York University at the Tisch School of the Arts, Department of Undergraduate Film and Television, where I've taught for the last 19 years. I taught at the North Carolina School of the Arts, School of Filmmaking. So I teach filmmaking and I make pictures. Thank you.
Okay, great. I think to start off, what might be interesting for some of the aspiring filmmakers in the room and just filmmakers in general, if you guys could talk about the process where you, from an idea to production. So in your own experience, what are the challenges, and how did you find a way to take your idea and actualize it? And we can start and go down the line.
I can't stress the script enough. A lot of people think, I edit films, so I understand the process of writing is the same. You have to take a long time with it. A lot of people are like, they write the script and then they can't wait to make it, and then you try to fix things in post or while you're in production, and it's much, much more difficult. I think every detail that you want on the screen should be handled in the script. So the more you spend on your script, the better chance you'll have to have something to edit, and shoot.
Can you repeat the question? No, I'm kidding. Can we skip me and I'll come back to it?
Well, for me, because I did a documentary and it's such a sensitive subject, it was really important for me to go to his mother and ask permission. So after I got her blessing, I then went through the process of just interviewing a lot of different people, it can be very hard because you're working on other people's time, but it can also be very rewarding. Also, it's kind of like just a big research project. I know one of my, favorite parts was after I actually finished doing all of the interviews. I took all of my compiled data, and then I went through and I transcribed each interview. I literally wrote down everything anyone had said, and then I organized everything. And then from there, like she said, it made it a lot easier when we got into the editing room. So, did I answer the question? Yeah. Okay.
again, I've been doing this long enough that I've had sort of every experience on how something starts. There have been the ones that I had an idea and nurtured the idea and put the script through multiple drafts and went out and raised the money. And then there have been situations where, I get a call from my agent and I'm on a plane the next day and I'm working on a project for the next 6 months or a year in Chicago or LA and, don't look back. So the thing to remember is there's no pattern, there's no recurring pattern. Every project is different, which is part of what makes this business so much fun. But each one is different in its gestation, each one is different in what it's going to take from you and what's new skills you're going to have to acquire. Each one is different in the constellation of people you have to gather around you to get it done, because it's not, they don't get done by one person. And each one is different in the final product. And you never know until you get it on the screen. I mean, over the years, I've made a couple of really good movies, and I've made a couple of really bad ones, and a bunch in between. But when you're working on them, you don't know if it's going to be good or bad. It always seems like this is the one, and it's not till the audience sees it and tells you how you did. So you just got to go, wake up every day and start slugging and putting it together and figuring out what are the bottlenecks, what are the things in the way of getting this thing shot, and that's what I got to tackle now.
I was trying to think of what to add that would be complementary. So I'm going to speak at the moment about documentary films, since there are enough people on the panel who will speak about fiction. I do think that documentary relies as well on a proverbial script. That is to say that if you have an idea for a film, you do need to do a level of research. You need to be very clear about what it is you're intending to do. I'm a big advocate in teaching, as well as in my profession, of writing proposals. I believe that the proposal is the documentarian's script. How come? So if I'm making a film in Montana, I have to talk about who I'm going to film there, what I'm going to film there. That's like a script. It defines where I go. It defines my budget. So in the same way that a script defines a budget, who you're hiring, who you're casting, a proposal is the same way in a documentary film. And that's not to suggest that things don't evolve or shift a little bit, but I have to say to you that every documentary film that I have made, the notion that it is made in the editing is a half-truth. Invariably, the film that I make in the editing room is the film that I articulated in my proposal, because that's what I went out to film. I didn't kind of go someplace, spend thousands of dollars to arrive someplace and start filming something that I never even thought that I would film. That would be a very poor use of money if I was the producer. I could never sanction that over and over and over again in the production. So I just give you that as a germ and something to think about if you're making a documentary, to not believe that an idea in and of itself is a film. You need to do a level of research. And as this young woman has sort of expressed, and I support completely, if you get access to someone or to a story, you really have the beginnings of a film. Absence of access, when I teach, I ask my students to write the 10 most important things about making a documentary, and they almost never write access. And I say the most important thing is access. If you do not have access, you can't make your picture.
I finally collected my thoughts, so I'm going to answer this question. So I didn't write American Pride. I came up with the story. And this is a story that I've wanted to tell years before we actually made it. I, shopped it around to producers, and they were like, "You're never going to make this film in Shreveport. It's an LGBT film about a man who comes out at his sister's wedding, incidentally." But so whenever I got turned down, I kind of got discouraged, and I kind of just put the project on the back burner. Well, whenever me and Tamsin, the girl who writes and directs the Camden production films, we did American Virgin, and we just had such a great connection. We worked so well together. And then I gave her the idea of doing the story, which ended up becoming American Pride, which is kind of like a sequel to American Virgin. And I think when you do have an idea and a story and you necessarily aren't the writer, I think it is, very good to trust the writer. I think with my idea, it is a bold story, and me and Tamsin have such a good relationship. And so being able to, share my story with her and trust her with my vision, I think that's the most important thing, is if you do have a story, you have to trust your writer, you have to trust the person with your story, and I couldn't have chose a better person to connect with and have tell my story. So I think basically just say if you're not a writer and you want to do a short film or a feature film or documentary, I think the best advice I can give is to, find someone you trust that's in the industry that, has the ability to do it.
Yeah, that's actually a comment on that, because a lot of when we start making movies, we do autobiographical or things that we're close to, and the hardest thing to do as a writer is to separate yourself from the reality and create a drama or a comedy or whatever it is you're trying to create, because so many people get stuck in the, oh, but that's not how it really happened. And I think that's the value of working with somebody else, is like bouncing those ideas off of and letting them create a story of your story, so to speak.
And I would also say, just to piggyback off of him, especially with documentaries, always maintain integrity. I know, like I said, it's my first time, and so a lot of people spoke with me. They sat down and they talked to me just because they trusted me, and it was easy for them to open up to me. And even in the editing room, integrity is really big, because it's so much power in editing. And you have to make sure that you're just going to do right by the people that is entrusting you with their name and their image. And integrity just goes a long way.
I want to follow up on the through line that I'm hearing, which is the idea that you mentioned of the constellation of collaboration, the idea of you finding your collaborators. So maybe you guys could talk about the aspiring filmmakers. They need to put together a team, whether you're finding a cinematographer or an editor or the actors or subject matter, someone to write with. Maybe you know the person. Maybe you're looking at people's reels. Can you just talk about how to put together a team to make your idea a reality?
I always have to go first. That's all right. Actually, this is an interesting question, because everybody does it differently, and I'm on my third time around, and I'm doing it totally differently than I did the first time. But I actually started with a DP because I didn't know anything about that world at all, and it really was a mystery to me. So I wanted someone that I could really talk to about my vision with, that could be my second set of eyes. And then I had this weird idea that if I had a good DP, I'd get a good talent. Like, I don't know, my logic was not so straight, but it worked for me. But I think you can put a team together anyway, but the most important thing is to trust people, and you have to have that, like, be able to create and not be in a vacuum, I guess.
So as far as creating a team, in Shreveport, there was a little show called Salem that was filmed up there, and that's kind of how Camden Productions even happened. And we basically, outsourced a lot of our crew, a lot of our background from the people that we worked with. I think it's very important that, say, if you do work in a lower level on a big budget production, to make those connections. Know who, say you are really friendly with someone in the costume department. make a good connection with them, and they will be your costumer, or vice versa with like camera, grip. I think using those resources when you do work on those types of productions, when you are maybe just a background or like a PA, just capitalizing on those connections. I think that's the most important thing that helped get our films made, is just by not being scared to ask people for help. Asking for help, it sucks, but I mean, when you do, have a community of filmmakers and people that want to help you, it's, you just have to ask for help and not be scared to.
But people love to help.
Right.
And the
they do.
first AC may want to be a producer.
Right.
And then you've got to, everyone's trying different things. So you just have to talk about it, really.
And you would be surprised, like, how many people would want to, donate their time for free just to help you do your production. I can't speak highly enough for the Salem production for how much they helped us, and the whole crew and cast just really came together and like pushed us to make our first short film, and then that just led to a trilogy of short films, and so now we have 3 short films that we've made, and it all became from me and Tamsin. She was an actress on the show, and I was just a little PA at the time, and we both
Now you're a big producer.
look at me. But no, we shared the passion for film and wanting to tell stories, and I think that's the most important thing is, find the passionate people, find the people who you trust, and, you make a great team. I can't speak enough about that.
I agree with everything they said. For me, I did not have a background per se in film. I'm actually an engineer, so I have a degree in engineering. But I've always been passionate about film and about writing. And so it was really challenging. I ran into a lot of challenges initially, and they say there's a lot of people who will want to help for free, but it's always better if you pay them. And if they don't share the same passion as you do, you're gonna have challenges, So there's all types of things out there. Like, we did a Kickstarter campaign and we were successful through that. But building a team, I would just say take your time, and like they said, make sure that you have people that you can trust. And I'm really big on passion, so make sure that you have people who are passionate about the same topic or whatever it is that you're doing.
There are a couple of different levels. Like, if it's a costume and all, they're going to be around for the shooting, and that's an investment in their time, but when you're looking for a partner, when you're looking for somebody who's going to write the thing with you or produce the film you want to make or one of those things, it's a bit like a marriage. And you have to be ready for those compromises. So, I think the first bit of homework you need to do is soul search yourself and say, why am I making this film? Am I making it because it's a documentary on a topic I think the world needs to see? Or am I making it because this is the next step in my career path, I want to do a bigger movie after that? Whatever it is, be honest with yourself. And you need to find somebody who shares that goal, because once they come on board, they're going to have a lot of ideas that aren't your ideas, and there are going to be compromises, ways of doing things, directions to take the story in, thoughts in the editing room, how much to pay people, all those daily decisions, and you're going to be in the trenches with them, and there are going to be times when you're going to be back to back fighting off the marauders. So you need somebody who not only you can trust, but also who shares your reason for being there. And again, before that, you have to know what your reason for being there is.
I'd like to just then share an insight regarding the director or producer, editor collaboration in a documentary, to try to give one particular insight. So I teach and mentor, I teach students and I mentor people who've graduated, and I often tell them, when you're looking to hire an editor, utilizing the analogy of a marriage, I think that's a very good consideration. But I talk about a few things with editors. It's very hard to discern what an editor has explicitly done by looking at her or his reel or her or his film, because it is collaborative. So you can't exactly look and say, oh, that editor is great. Now, if you're making a cinema verite or a direct cinema documentary, you should look for somebody who may have that in their portfolio. But I think there are a couple of things that I value and I always dispense as something useful. Do you like the person? Because when you work with an editor, you're going. Now, I'm looking at the framework of working with an editor, not sending something off remotely. They work and they send it back. But I'm talking about really collaborating with them. Do you like them? Because you're going to be spending time with them. In my experience with making films, I've encountered two types of editors. There is the verbal editor, and then there is the visual editor. And as Jeff has said, it took me a while to realize I'm a verbal director. I like to talk out my ideas. I come into the editing room, I want to talk about things before something even happens. Therefore, I need an editor who also is verbal, who's going to engage me in conversation. Conversely, I have worked with an editor, and it didn't work out very well because that editor was a visual editor. She simply wanted me to say, this is what we were doing today, and let her work. And we bumped heads because neither of us were getting what we needed from each other. So I put those two things out to you. Do you like the person? Can you get along? And recognizing what type of director or producer you are. Are you verbal or visual? If you're verbal, find a verbal editor. If you're visual, find a visual editor.
I just want to support that because, trust me, no space on this planet is smaller than an editing room when you're not getting along with your editor. It's every day is hell.
And even when you're getting along with them, every day is hell.
Yeah, because I remember having to switch editors because they lied to me to get this, to work with me, and then once I hired them, they didn't want me in the editing room, and I was like, I'm not gonna just drop my story off, I want to be in there, so I had to start over. It's challenging, but the end result is always worth it. So just hold your ground.
I think it's great advice. I have one more quick question, and then I'm going to open up to the audience. So if you guys have questions for these filmmakers, and we'll start on this end. So now you guys can have some time. And it's just this: you make your film, right? And then how do you get it seen? Obviously, we're all here. Bringing to festivals is a way to get attention and to be seen. Maybe you could just talk about ways in which people who do self-produce or collaborate and produce can get their films in front of other people.
I don't really know the answer to this question. I'm here to learn as well because my professional career has been one in which all of my films have been broadcast on television, and that has meant that I have received television money in advance of making the film. But in the last 3 years, I've shifted my approach to filmmaking. I've elected to look for access, valuing access to a story or somebody as much as getting money. And so I have a couple of films that I'm making that are about artists that are not easily funded by the traditional funding entities. So I'm finding it to be a greater challenge to think about how to get it out to a public. But here's the thing that I would say, and I think this is really the creative challenge we are facing. There are gatekeepers. I call them the gatekeepers. It's the funders, whether it's broadcast, whether it's private equity, whether it's foundation. There are the festivals. Those are gatekeepers. Festivals decide on films because they are thinking about audiences, who's going to come in. They're raising money maybe from a foundation or from investors. They have to satisfy that. So it's an interesting dilemma of whether or not you make the film that you really care about, or are you trying to make the film that you think is going to get seen. So if the traditional models for dissemination of your work is not as easily available to you, i.e. broadcast, theatrical, festival, how are you getting your work out there? And I think this is where, clearly the plethora of platforms that exist for individuals to at least self-promote offers one way of getting the work out there. But what is not really clarified is what's the possibility for remuneration? How do you make your money back? How do you benefit from your Vimeo channel, your YouTube channel, your whatever it is? How are you going to kind of maximize your exposure so that it enables you to get the next project out there? And that's still, I think everybody is trying to discover how to do that in a landscape that is both expanding on the one hand, but really expanding for a certain set of people and therefore shrinking for many of the others of us. And that has to do with the fact that so many more people are now able to make films.
I mean, part of it, so you're talking about working on the script early on and stuff, part of getting your film distributed starts, just as you're starting to write down the script. You have to know who the audience is. And when I say that, I don't mean just, what sort of people will be interested in this, but what's the audience? Is this something for PBS? Is this something that, is going to be, straight to download? Is this something that's going to, cost enough? You need a theatrical, at least a platform theatrical release to get the word out so it can make money in other markets. Is this something that will be, has a prayer overseas? And then when you make those suppositions, you got to do the research. You're talking about research on the script, but if you're wearing the producer's hat on this, you got to really look in and look for information that's not easy to find on, if it gets on Netflix, how much money does that really bring back? And how many hands take a piece of that before it gets to you? Because to the extent you need to recoup the cost of the movie before you make the next one, you have to figure all those things in. And it's tough. When I started, it was really hard to make a movie because film had to go through the lab and it was all expensive and stuff. But if you made a half-decent movie, people noticed it. Now, it's so much easier because you got cameras like that can put something on the big screen and then looks pretty good. But getting eyeballs is tough because there are a lot of people out there. So that's the trade-off. How do you stand out? Don't kid yourself that, if you look at something you see on television or you see on Netflix and say, I can do something that good, and that's my ticket, it won't be your ticket because there's already somebody doing something that good. You got to figure out what's going to make me stand out, what's going to be different, what do I have that's not out there in triplicate already, what can I bring to the table? Because that's how you get written about. Getting written about gets you noticed. Getting noticed gets you watched, and getting watched hopefully gets it sold. Gets people. Somebody asked my wife at a party one time, "Well, what exactly is it you guys do?" And she said, "We put butts in seats." That's what we do, and that's what you got to do.
She's got one. Thank you.
You may need to stereo.
Feedback?
The only thing I'll say, and then I'm going to pass because I'm still learning, is just do something that people either care about, don't know about, or find a need. And don't be afraid of no.
And like you said, finding your audience is very important. With our first film, we kind of went all across the board with submitting it to all these different festivals. And one thing I realized is, you're not going to get into the big festivals that you dream of on your first, usually with your first film. I think with our second film, American Pride, we tried to go more towards the LGBT festivals, the festivals that, have like that type of audience. And I think finding your niche and audience is very important. Also, doing research on the festivals you submit to is very important. Like festivals that offer distribution, like the Louisiana Film Prize, is such an amazing festival. I could talk for hours about it, but I won't. I think also reaching out to programs, like, for example, for American Pride, there really isn't an LGBT New Orleans Film Festival that I'm aware of or that I could find online. So I reached out to New Orleans Pride, their organization, and I was like, hey, I have this LGBT film. Is there like some way we could show it? And they were like, well, if you want to do this, if you want to start this program, if you want to build like, other films that you could throw in, we could do like a little mini film festival. So I just did a post online and got like some amazing little short films from Louisiana Filmmakers that are all LGBT, and we're doing an LGBT film festival in New Orleans for Gay Pride Week. So it's things like that you don't necessarily have to submit to a festival per se to get your film to be seen. You could do something like that, and I think I've never done a film festival before, but it's going to be a challenge and interesting, and I'm ready to do it. And also with distribution, I also do, like you said, do your research. You don't want to sign into anything that you really, I don't want to say this. Just do your research and know your audience.
Don't make a bad deal.
Exactly.
And I'm going to say, everything, definitely there's gatekeepers. It's all across the board. I think we're on the cusp of a kind of a revolution because there is so much access to, but I want to go back to what you said about building your community, because I'm not a producer and I know who my audience is when I create, but how to get there, I'm not sure that's my forte or my strength. So I think teaming up with people who know how to do that or want to do that. So I now have a producer whose passion is producing, and I get to just focus on filmmaking and making movies and telling stories. And I can just say this, like, the only thing I want to add is, like, it's so hard and it's so much work. Like, making a movie, I've raised a kid by myself. Making a movie's harder. It's really, really hard, and if you don't love it, every second of it, if you don't wake up just excited and go to bed excited, don't do it. Please don't do it. Find something else to do, because it's extremely demanding. And I love it, as much as my son.
The key to any next-gen recoil rig is balance while keeping your rig short and light. Your eye, shoulder, and hand placement never change, so the key is to slide the camera as far back as needed to achieve the perfect balance. This forces your EVF and camera control forward, but our unique VCT base plate design gives you extra rod space, making it possible to mount accessories close to the camera body, allowing for a perfectly balanced recoil rig. The next-gen recoil's adjustability is great enough to balance any size camera with any size lens and any additional accessories, and its quick releasability makes setup and breakdown fast and effortless.
Let's see if there are any questions. Raise your hand if you have a question. Yeah, if you could, I'll try and bring this mic over to you.
My name is Raul Olivier. I'm a professional film camera actor, and there's a question I always ask an editor. What can I, the actor, do to help you, the editor? There's a standard 10 or 11 things, but every editor always has one extra thing that I hadn't heard before. So I'd like to ask the editor and all of you, what can actors do to help you, the editor?
As an editor, as a narrative editor, I actually want to do a workshop on this, because there's a lot you can do. Knowing where the camera is, understanding, how to, and I don't know how to do this. I would, I have actor friends who know how to do this, and I learned that actors who know where the camera are really good to work with. A lot of people end up on the cutting room floor because they don't do the same action in the wide as they do with the close-up or the medium shot. They make different choices between the different takes, and it just leaves you less stuff to work with. There's a lot you can do, but I would say, be consistent in your action on a technical level.
And don't wait for action to get into character.
Totally.
And don't stop at cut.
Yes.
Don't stop until people are turning the lights off.
That's huge. Don't follow through with your action, and when the minute you hear rolling, before you hear rolling, be in character, because I can't tell you how many times I've used that moment. That's the most relaxed an actor is, and the most subtle an actor is. So yeah, definitely, just be on.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Going to use that. Yeah, sir, here you go.
Have you ever been in a situation where you had to work with someone who isn't in the same area, or like do it long distance, or just collaborate over the internet? And if so, how did you handle that?
So this past year for our third short film, usually me and Tamsin would both be in Shreveport filming Salem. This year we didn't have that because unfortunately it got canceled. So she was in Toronto filming Supergirl and I was in New Orleans just living in New Orleans. And so it was very difficult having to prep remotely with her being in Vancouver, me being in New Orleans, prepping a film in Shreveport. We literally got our script 3 weeks before we shot. So this was the most unorganized film that we ever did, but you know, whenever we actually went into filming, it was it's the craziest shoot, but the smoothest shoot we had ever done. And I think because it's our third time working together, like I guess I can go back to the trust and like the partnership that me and her have. It's just, yeah, it was very difficult, but the fact that we work so well together, we know each other, we know how to work with each other. And we basically use a lot of the same crew members, we use a lot of the same resources. We didn't have a lot of the things that were available to us, so we actually had to look elsewhere for like equipment and, you know, different cameras and that type of thing. So just, you know, being on your toes and being able to know where to look and what to do is very helpful.
I live in Houston, and my DP that I work with actually lives here in Baton Rouge. So I would say just being organized is really important, and creating a schedule or an agenda, to let him know what you needed to do, what B-roll, like where you want to go this day. Or sometimes if I couldn't make it here, I would like say, hey, can you go out and get this? And he would do that. I would just say just being really organized. And
I think the question is, why do you want to work with somebody who's remote from you? Because then if there's a value, so maybe it's a cinematographer whose work you really value, it's a writer or director that you worked with before, that's the reason, and then you have already begun a methodology for collaboration. And so I would then say that if it's simply because that's the first person you've heard of or somebody's recommended that to you, maybe that's not a good idea, because even with organization, it's much harder to develop. I mean, it's like we've talked about the analogy of a marriage. Let's go steps before a marriage. A long-distance relationship is hard to maintain and be consistent if you're, X number of hours apart. So you have to really ask, is that something you really want to do? And I struggled most recently with a film where I lived in Brooklyn, New York, and my editor lived up in Washington Heights. It's a hour subway ride, and it was a pain in the ass. It just didn't work. Whenever I was ready to come look at some work, she wasn't ready. Her dog was this, a doctor's appointment. It just drove me crazy. So it really raised the question, why did I want that situation? And I, for myself, don't want that situation if I can help it. In many instances, there are collaborators much closer by, and you have the opportunity to develop a relationship. But if you do have a relationship, then you have a relationship.
And I agree. So with after experiencing the DP situation, which was good because I really like him, but when it came for like editor, I knew I wanted someone that I can get my hands on, so I didn't want to work with someone that was at a distance.
It happens all the time. I mean, it's not an ideal situation, but it happens all the time. And part of it is figuring out a division of labor. so that the stuff that requires close collaboration is not what you're trying to do when you're far apart, but we did a movie for German cable a couple of years ago, and one producer's in Paris and I was here. And so, they took the European part of the shoot, I took the American part of the shoot, so it made sense. I did a movie for, I directed a movie for Showtime in Chicago, and one of the producers, a senior producer, had a bigger movie going at the same time in Toronto. So I literally never met the guy until we had finished shooting, but he's getting screeners of the footage every day and calling in his notes usually when I'm on the set. So I didn't even hardly get to talk to the guy, but I'd get these, cryptic things that I couldn't quite, it's like you're trying to make sense of what this really mean. And, but he's the guy who could fire me. So you had, it wasn't a collaboration. It was, but you make it work. You make it work. Editing is tough, but we've even done that where you just, the technology helps these days because you can get the footage across overnight and at least get to see the stuff, even if not in real time, at least soon.
I think that motion picture is probably one of the most powerful ways you can communicate a message. I think 10 years ago, if you didn't have massive budgets, you were severely limited on the quality of story that you could tell based off of the music that you had access to. That to me is what MusicBed changed, is it made the best artists in the world available to hundreds of thousands of filmmakers. And that hasn't really existed before. What we've done is created a platform to allow the creatives to be making the choice of who wins. That's been one of the most fulfilling things for us, is watching hundreds of artists just almost begin to dream at another level.
Hello, I am a writer, and I'm usually with short films, but currently I'm writing for a theater, some projects for theater, and I want to know, is the writing process different for a screenwriter than as a theater writer, and how so?
I would definitely say the biggest difference between film and theater is that film is a visual medium, so it's all about what you see and what you hear. And with theater, a lot of your exposition is going to be through dialogue, and that doesn't happen as often in film.
In the theater, the writer controls the written word, and in film, everybody rewrites the writer.
Thank you.
No, nobody says author at the end of a movie. It doesn't happen. Next. But they pay you well to be humiliated, so that's the other side of it.
Yeah, another question here.
Actually, my follow-up question is for Marco. You have a co-director credit on the film that you have in the festival that I got to see last night. And did you guys collaborate together, or did you collaborate long distance? Did you interview different segment people? How did that work out? Because you don't get a lot of co-director credits.
So I started on the project not at the time that Stanley started conceiving. Stanley Nelson, the writer, director, producer, but I started on the film once the money was raised, and I wrote the initial script. I did the early pre-interviews. Stanley was promoting the Black Panther film. I conducted all the early interviews. Then as his schedule evolved, he and I shared interviews. He would ask some questions, and I would sit on the sidelines, and then I would come in like a relief pitcher and do that. I then did the early paper edit for the film, and then Stanley did the finishing editing. So that was the dynamic there. I mean, I lived in New York. I was a work for hire, so it wasn't my film. It's not a Firelight Media, Hip Truth Productions film. It's a Firelight Media film. So that was the dynamic of how that works. So I was very involved in all of the creativity and certainly laying the foundation of it, whereas Stanley did the final editorial choices.
Cool. Do we have any more questions? Raise your hand if you got a question. Anybody over here in the back? No? Yeah, right here.
Thank you all. Someone mentioned briefly about the festival circuits and how best to get your picture seen and in front of people. And someone has mentioned to us about a company called Without a Box. Has anyone heard of that company, or is that a good idea? Or should we go directly to sites and submit the film
Can I speak
via?
So I want to tell me your name.
Cam.
Dan?
Cam.
Sam. Sam said something that I think is really important, but I want to open the lens up a little bit about festivals. And I think it's very, very important that filmmakers appreciate the following. There are A-list festivals, Sundance, Toronto, Tribeca, right? A-list festivals, Berlin, Cannes, A-list festivals. Then there are like B-list festivals, Dallas International, New Orleans, Telluride, Hampton, right, B. Then there are niche. And so what's very important for filmmakers to know is that if you go to niche festivals first and get in there, the A-list festivals will not screen your film. They want to be world premieres. So if you get into Sundance, Tribeca doesn't accept you. Right, so that's just kind of the dynamic. They're all vying to be first in line and sort of saying they discovered. So I always say to young filmmakers, you need a festival strategy. You need to identify the A-list festivals that you aspire to, even though it's a long shot, but you go to the A-list festivals. Then it's good to go to B-list festivals. Identify the B-list. Maybe it's in your hometown. Maybe it's in the hometown of the people in your film, something like that. And then think about what are the niche festivals that you know are LGBTQ or African American or Latino or Asian, Jewish, whatever it might be. So that's just something to really kind of understand. Without a Box, Film Freeway, Without a Box charges you money. What's useful is that you can go online and it lets you know, it has a listing of all sorts of festivals. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't still know your strategy, right? Here's something that's a dirty little secret and useful for all filmmakers to have in mind. It costs money to submit a film to a film festival by and large. So what I recommend to all of us, all of you, is that you create a sample or a trailer. You identify online who is the artistic director and the programming director, and you send her or him or them your trailer and a description of your film, and you say to them, would this be something you're interested in, and would you give me a fee waiver? Ask for that fee waiver. Now, 9 out of 10 times they're not going to give you the fee waiver, but that one time has saved you some coin. And the only way they're going to consider that is if they see that. So now you don't send it to, if you don't have a contact at Sundance and they're getting 2,000 short film submissions, they're not going to give it to you, right?
14,000.
14,000. Like so I've had films at Sundance, so I could write them. But it's still worthwhile to identify the festivals, ask for a fee waiver first, and if you can't get a fee waiver, then you have to go the conventional way. But the dirty secret is that the fees, most of the people who submit through the Without a Box and through that standard practice, their films are not getting in. It's just a fact because of the sheer numbers of them. The way you kind of get into a festival is that festival directors know of you. They look at, so like festival directors will look at what was at Sundance, what was at this place. They see things that were already popular. They are part of a cohort in a community. They know each other. They talk about different films. So it's very hard to navigate that, and that's why you have to kind of put yourself out there to try to get noticed, and that's why I say to everybody, at the very least, ask. You lose nothing by asking.
So go to the sites and actually cold call or call email the director.
Yeah, you lose nothing. You lose nothing. It just takes, a persuasive email, a good trailer, cross your fingers. What's the worst that could happen? No. They say no, and you got to pay your capital anyway, but at least you gave yourself a chance.
A written letter.
Thank you.
I mean, how many written letters do people get these days?
A written letter.
If you type up a written letter, they're going to get it. It'll be the only one they get that month. And even if you don't get the waiver, I'm saying probably even more advantageous to your strategy is forget the waiver. The fact that somebody in that seat has heard about your film, has heard your name, so you're not just one of the 14,000 things coming in over the transom.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Anyone?
Just to kind of go off what they said, having a strategy is so important. Doing your research on these festivals is so important. I've fallen under the trap of submitting to a festival, and it was kind of a bogus festival. And you just have to make sure if there is a festival that's like it's its first year, do your research, look it up, give them a call. I think it's very important because I did submit and paid because it was like a late submission, so I paid $60 for this festival. I show up to the venue and it's at some hole-in-the-wall bar with like 3 people showed up. So I kind of got, they showed the film, so I can't really say anything else. But.
The only other thing that no one else has mentioned is that you can also get a film festival agent. And if you Google it, you can find them, and they curate your film, and they have relationships with festivals already, so that is another option if it's not your cup of tea, because it's a lot of work. Again, it's a full-time job, reading and talking and doing all that stuff.
What does a film festival agent cost the filmmaker?
Surprisingly less than you would think.
No, but I would like to know what it costs.
Their festival entries are usually $5 to $10 and sometimes free.
Okay.
Their markup, when I did the math, ended up, if I were to enter 4 festivals a month, it was less than that. So it's not a bad deal, but it's a curated thing, and you have to, and it's all negotiable. But it perked my interest. That's all I can say. They do all the legwork. Yes. Well, once it's in, you have to promote it. That's the other thing. Just because your movie gets into a festival doesn't mean people are going to go watch it.
I think what it sounds like is that an agent will have relationships that some of us may not have, and that can be an advantage. And the reason I was asking what's the cost is because if you have to pay something, you should still be...
Nothing's for free, yeah.
You should still be weighing the cost analysis of, do I hire somebody else, and check them out. Are they actually doing the work?
Exactly.
So when I say check them out, what's on their slate? What are the films that they've gotten into festivals? Contact those filmmakers and say, how did it work out for you? Don't just make the assumption that because they've got a shingle that says they're an agent, that they're not putting it in some bar that's not even giving you free drinks, even though they're showing your movie.
Did you get free drinks?
No.
So, see what I'm saying? Anyway.
Well, that's going to be our panel. Here's what I want you to do. Could you guys please tell the audience again your names and the name of your film here at the festival, just so they know? Yeah.
Eva Contis, The Stand.
Cam Owen with American Pride.
TaRhonda Bazille, The Ryan Francis Story.
Glen Petrie, One Night Off Campus.
And my name is Marco Williams. I'm the co-director and co-producer of Tell Them We Are Rising, the story of historically black colleges and universities that screens today at 2:15. And I guess I'll just say one other plug. You should watch the picture because it's about America. It's about the important contribution that the quest and demand for education of African Americans did and contributed to the world and the society that we live in.
Let's give a round of applause to the panel. Thank you, guys.
I'm going to add just one more thing. Learn from what this guy did, because if you want your film seen, you never, ever, ever should miss an opportunity to plug it.
We now have three Graticals, the Gratical X, the Gratical I, and the Gratical HD. The Gratical X and the Gratical HD are essentially the same unit. The only difference is you can, with the X, only buy the features you want and get in at a lower price. Both of these units are self-powered and they have video distribution. The I, on the other hand, you need power to use this unit. It only has an SD in, and it has two new features, a lit tally light and a proximity sensor to turn the unit off.
And it is small.
So this is our new Gratical line, the X, the I, and the HD.